has been amazing in understanding what learning needs we have, who's taken what, where we can see where there are gaps as well. It's great in terms of reducing the time and increasing efficiency of actually the background behind learning. I think AI has also been amazing in helping us deploy learning at scale. What are the experiences? What's creativity? What opportunities? How do we not just do the coaching bit, but how do we also make sure learning experience is interesting and what AI can contribute to that in terms of the style, the look, the feel, the avatars, the interaction, the engagement as well. The future of L&D and as a role is very much more front foot, very much more able to articulate business needs in business language, but ultimately making an impact for the people who are in the organisation in terms of their individual careers, their teams and the organisation as well.
This episode of L&D Disrupt is brought to you by How Now, the learning platform that actually makes learning matter. Because let's face it, you could push out loads of content, track skills in a spreadsheet, drown in admin, and still not know what's working. Or you could use How Now to connect your people to the skills they need. Deliver learning in the flow of work and prove it's making a difference. That's how modern companies like Depop, Trainline, Crunchyroll, SoEnergy, Forsaven, TomTom, Investec, and so many more do it. Learn more at gethownow.com.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to L&D Disrupt. I am Kelsey, the Learning and Performance Lead at How Now, and I'm joined today by Derek Bruce, who is the CLO at Easygenerator. Welcome, Derek. Lovely to have you.
Hey, thank you, and thank you for the invitation as well, actually.
Yeah, of course. Our pleasure. So I will hand it over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you're doing at Easygenerator?
Yeah, so I've been the Chief Learning Officer at Easygenerator for now about 6 months, which is basically looking after how we talk about our product externally, but also making sure internally is a bit of thought leadership and making sure people have the right skills to lead at Easygenerator as well. Prior to that, I spent a lot of time in the UK, most recently working for Tesco in leadership and culture team. And prior to that, had the joy of spending 10 years in Amsterdam, working in different industries such as financial services, technology and biochemist, doing HR business partner roles, doing L&D roles and doing leadership development roles as well. I'm currently living in Dubai, and outside of work, love football, love motorbikes, love Adidas Shell-toe trainers.
Love it, Shell-toe trainers.
Yeah.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't? So let's jump right in. So what can you tell us about what you think is wrong with L&D today? Do you think we're focusing too much on content and less on capability and performance, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me, L&D is this tipping point of how it defines itself into the next kind of like 10 years or so. And I think what functions aren't doing right across the board, I think it's generally is actually not just thinking there's enough content out there. So L&D is great at creating courses, learning journeys, experiences, and in essence, creating new content. But actually, sometimes that's not needed. So I think one of the things we've got into a habit of doing, and I say we, myself included, is making new stuff when actually the stuff that's there can be reused, can be repurposed, and actually can give a learner an opportunity to find it themselves. So I think definitely content is one of the things.
Absolutely.
And I think the second thing is also just a bit about where it positions itself and how it focuses on what it's going to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. Do you think there's anything, as we're shifting from more of a content-related focus into thinking about performance, what do you see organizations are doing that have a lot of impact in that area? What does that look like in L&D?
Yeah, I think there's 2 or 3 things. I think one of the things is the organizations are asking one simple question, which is, so what? And the question is basically, if we do this, what happens in terms of our organizational goals, organizational priorities, organizational impact? And I think when it comes down to then what we're doing around learning, I'm seeing organizations who then link their learning to performance, their learning to individual skills, which the organization needs as well, and they link the learning to what's going to make a difference.
Yeah,
and I think out of those 3 things, when they do it even better, they do it really quickly and in a flow of work, as opposed to going, I've got to spend X amount of times waiting for this particular learning journey, then I've got to go and do it, which is X amount of days. I've got to come back, and the environment isn't always right. So I think in the flow of work, impactful, skills related, but also performance related are the things I'm seeing where it's working well.
Yeah, absolutely. I see the same thing. And how do you find that, particularly in the flow of work and where it's performance related, how do you see organizations connecting that to business outcomes or business priorities to show real impact within the L&D function?
Yeah, I think one of the things is actually understanding and asking employees what's going wrong and what do they need. And I think the question, what's going wrong, is a very important one, because in learning, we sometimes initiate what we're doing from a perspective of there's a organization or there's a team, there's some kind of, we need to create training. We don't always go, I'm somebody working in sales, in customer service, in marketing, in finance, and I am just struggling with this. We're getting hit for six by this. We're not able to do this. We don't know how to do this. We can't react to this. And I think those conversations with the people who need the support are a high priority as well. So I think that's one of the things. And the other thing is actually organizations who are planning around what skills they think they may need going forward, as opposed to what learning they think they need going forward as well. So it's definitely in terms of understanding technology, whether it's human-centric, whether it's anything in between those, is understanding what are the bits of skills we need which make us successful now and also going forward as well.
Yeah, you mentioned thinking about what kind of support people need, where they are in their role, in their position, their seniority in the company. Where do managers come into that? How do you utilize management to support those kinds of needs?
Yeah, I think one of, again, going back to me, you said about what we're not doing well, I think one of the things we haven't done historically is involve the managers and leaders at the start of any learning intervention.
Yeah.
So if you think about the last course you've been on, as somebody who's listening to this podcast, was your manager openly discussed what was going on by the person creating the course? Was your manager involved in understanding what you were going to learn? Was your manager involved in actually then being able to help you apply what you come away from? Or was your manager involved in creating the right environment that when you get back to the office or back to what you're doing, you've got the space to use it as well? So for me, I think involving the leader at all stages of learning journey, if it's kind of be almost like a 10% kind of focused learning, is really important. But also involving a manager in terms of how you measure the impact, and a manager involved with how you have individual almost has the space to deploy what's been learned as well. So I think that's always been a challenge in terms of you leave learning, you get back to your whatever environment you're in, and it doesn't help you apply it. And that's what I go back to. The flow of work, I think, is a much better approach as well.
Definitely. I always lean on the application part of it, but even myself, I've always had the best learning experiences where I can do it in the flow of work and be able to apply it immediately, but also have that supplemented by support from a manager. They understand what I'm doing. So I absolutely find that to be true. I want to shift a little bit.
Okay.
And I have to say the word that's top of mind for everyone, which is AI. You already know. I have to say it. So what do you think, as the AI boom is happening, what does that look like in L&D in practice that's beyond the hype of what everyone's talking about?
I think the first thing, the hype is something we should all be very aware of, and also question why the hype is there. I think for me, AI in some aspects has helped organizations and subsequently L&D and HR teams dramatically when it comes down to ability to identify trends using data. I think AI has been amazing in understanding what learning needs we have, who's taken what, where we can see where there are gaps as well. I think it's great in terms of reducing the time and increasing efficiency of actually the background behind learning. I think AI has also been amazing in helping us deploy learning at scale. So if you think about, for example, coaching, if I think of my historical career in terms of how coaching's always been, if you're a senior leader, if you're somebody who is on a board, you get a person coach. If you're next level down, you might get a person, but you'll probably get somebody who's a person, but it's virtual. If you're below that, then coaching is kind of one of those things you may or may not get. I think with AI, it's allowing organizations to scale some stuff and also allowing them to apply, going back to your practice piece as well, the ability to practice using AI on very specific topics as well. And I think outside of that, it's also been great, I think, for helping us think how we do deploy it. What are the experiences? What's creativity? What opportunities? How do we not just do the coaching bit, but how do we also make sure learning experience is interesting and what AI can contribute to that in terms of the style, the look, the feel, the avatars, the interaction, the engagement as well.
Yeah, I think coaching is a huge piece, particularly for, I'm in a customer facing role, anybody who's customer facing or even managers, people who have to have very specific kinds of conversations to be able to practice those, get feedback. It's been a huge help in that way. I have seen, though, a lot of people, there's this idea that AI is cheating. And what's been your experience? Have you heard this? And what does that look like? And how should organizations be approaching that?
Yeah, back to the point around being aware of how it's being sold as the next big thing. I think when I was working in one of the previous organizations, we had the most amazing AI deployment, which is meant to help upskill a lot of our white collar workers around the UK. And after a period of time, we said, we're going to get you back in some focus groups to ask you, how has it been for you? How's the experience been using this particular GPT in terms of your day-to-day, in terms of outside of work, in terms of inside work? Just talk to us about, you've now been educated, you've now increased awareness, what's good for you? And 3 things came out, which was really weird. The first thing which came out was the version of AI we used internally wasn't as great as what the individuals who used it outside of work used. So we're kind of like, yeah, this is fine, but if I use another well-known version, it's much better than what's internal to work. So actually, I'm not going to use it. So that was one of the things. But the 2 more human-centric bits of feedback which were trending were, secondly, people thought if they admitted to using it, they were cheating. So they wouldn't be transparent about the fact they'd used it to help round the edges of a presentation. They've used it to help make sure that this data actually was completely right. They've used it in a way which was not AI created and taken away their expertise knowledge, but it was AI helping them to make sure what they presented or shared made perfect sense. And they didn't want to be transparent about it. And that was the second bit. It's a bit of a weird one because unless we're transparent in terms of how we use it, then we don't know how to share the good ways of using it. So it's this weird catch-22. But the third most worrying thing was people felt that it was cheating.
Right.
People felt like if I'm using it, then my expertise, my knowledge, why do I have it? And we had a lot of conversations about it. We're kind of saying, but if you're using it in a way where you're not co-pilot as in the platform, but as a co-piloting you in terms of how you use it, and you're doing the right checks and balances, you're being skeptical, you're using judgment, you're using your human-centric skills as well, and it's given a great result which makes an impact, there should be no guilt because it's another tool. It's the same way many years ago you had Microsoft Office, which didn't exist, for those people don't realize. So things like Excel, PowerPoint, Word were not always in the workplace, and they allow people to make beautiful spreadsheets and documents and PowerPoints. But yeah, so it's the same, it's an evolution. I think what I do find interesting for people I speak to about it is when we think about technological revolutions, it's always been scaled and quite slow. So it's gone through government and then large corps, and then it's gradually worked its way down into the masses. With AI, it's just been, here you go, use it. And I think that there's no guardrails, there's no, oh, okay, so I can just type this in, I can do this, I can do that. And so especially in a corporate lens, there's very much this, should I be using it? And maybe that's the reason why. But I do find there's this huge kind of, am I doing it? If I do it, should I tell anybody? Or is it better than me? But this is very strange, I find.
Yeah,
but I understand it.
Feels a bit Wild West at times.
Yeah.
You mentioned people thinking about, if we're doing all of this,
Yeah.
what does it mean for my own skills? I know there's a bit of a fear around, is this going to replace me?
Yeah.
And when you're thinking about more of the traditional L&D models, thinking about content subscriptions or paid learning that we might be partnering with, things like that, what does that mean for when AI can produce so much of that? What does that then mean about how L&D functions, what that looks like?
It's interesting. One of the, in my own organization, Easygenerator, sorry, we have a question which is, to our product very quickly, allows anybody in an organization to create content based on their experience knowledge of that organization.
Yeah.
That's one of the things we do, which is amazing. What we've been pushed back is, actually, if you can do that, why can't I just stick stuff into whatever and they can create the content? And we've consistently said that's an option. And we're not saying it's right or wrong, but we are saying the difference is going to be if you use AI to create it 0 to 100, you're losing the essence of what humans bring to learning. You're losing the essence of expertise, and you're losing the essence of how that's going to make an impact. And also, AI is a generic tool. It's not designed for learning, marketing, finance, HR, IT. It's designed to be everything to everybody. So there are certain nuances which it will never get. And that's where, for us, for me especially, I think there's a need that humans, it's kind of like human first, AI second, in terms of humans can still be the ones who create, who initiate, who have that almost innovation piece, and the AI can help actually move that forward. But for me, it's not going to replace. I think one of the common things at Learning Tech this year was, is AI going to take away all the instructional design roles?
I've heard this a lot.
Constant question. And we're like, no, because it doesn't know what it doesn't know. And there's not enough almost brain power or processing power to have all the stuff which L&D people have put together over the last many hundred years to make sure AI works. I think it will make it more efficient. It will allow you to do it quicker, but it will still need you to top and tail to make sure. In the same way, AI can make music. I think I heard 50 Cent last year used AI to create a version of his song on Spotify. And he was playing around and he did it, but he said it sounds like this version of his song.
Yeah.
But he still created the original song. And it took his song and then it elevated it. It didn't create the original song. And so I think in terms of AI replacing roles, there are certain worries and certain challenges around entry-level roles, I think, in terms of data administration, which we can catch up on.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of roles where expertise is built, it can enhance, it can support, it can evolve, but I don't see it taking over those anytime soon.
Yeah, I think the human element is really important. I was actually doing some curriculum design recently, and I use AI to tweak things. But I think the thing is, as you said, around instructional designers, learning designers, anybody could go to any AI agent and say, create a curriculum on X. But if you don't have the learning and learning science background, you have no way to evaluate the quality of that output. You won't know how to tweak things or change it so it makes more sense, or that it's rooted in learning science and evidence-based practice. So I think the humans still have to have the expertise
100%.
Where you can use AI to facilitate things or give you structures for things, whatever you would like to do, but you still have to have the expertise to be able to evaluate the quality of the output and initiate it. Exactly.
I remember talking to my CEO, we're trying to work out, based on this question, like what analogy works. And we're saying, I fly a lot from London to UAE. And I was like, if I was on a plane where the pilot had been taught how to fly from scratch using AI, I'd be worried. So
Would you even get on the plane?
But if I was on a plane where the pilot had been taught had learned how to fly, plane should be the word actually, had been taught how to fly as they are taught now, with humans, with experience, with practice, and what have you. And then AI or simulations help the individual to understand certain nuances. So weather or turbulence or lightning or landing in different locations. AI helped to hone the skills. Makes perfect sense. But you wouldn't start from scratch using AI. And I think that kind of, for us, that's where we need to be aware that it has a real good use. But in terms of where it stands at today, its use is not at that initiation stage.
Yeah, I agree. And we were talking earlier about customer-facing roles or roles where you have to have specific kinds of conversations. There are lots of frameworks and best practices, and you want to practice with humans, but that sort of coaching piece can help you hone it, help you practice, help you improve. But it has to start with that.
It needs to be a foundation, I think. It needs to be a foundation of experience or expertise,
So to zoom out a little bit, what do you think L&D teams are doing wrong with AI now? You've mentioned a couple things, but what do you think are the common mistakes you're seeing?
I think there's probably three. I think one of them is, and this, how to word this, I don't know if it's L&D teams specifically, but I think there's been a lot of noise around senior roles and organizations saying, I hear about AI, we should be using it. And then they push organizations to have it, whether it's technology, HR, L&D, whatever. And so what I'm seeing is the push down where L&D teams are being told it needs to be AI driven. And we're like, why? Because
there's
it
no
does.
reason.
And it's so like, what's the benefit? What does it do? So I think for me, one of the things which we could be doing better is actually questioning if we are going to acquire or purchase or subscribe to an AI featured whatever, why are we doing it? What does it give us over anything at all we're doing now? And also, how do we measure the benefit of it in terms of what it's going to give us? Is it going to increase efficiency? Is it going to help us be quicker? Is it going to make the stuff we do allow us to have more headspace to do even more really cool stuff as well? So I think that's one of the, almost like why we're using it. I think the second thing is also we're not sharing enough of what we do as good practice for other people as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think there must be different ways AI is being used across different functions, different teams, and we're not making it visible. And I'm part of many communities, and we talk about sharing ideas on transformation, on culture, on performance management. We talk about how to make and have the most amazing leadership development programs, what kind of things we're doing around assessments. We don't say, in my organization, we've used AI to do this and it's been awesome. And here's how you can use it. Here's a catalog of prompts. Here's a really good platform. We're not doing that enough, I don't think. And I think the third thing is we're not also checking if it's what the people who we work with in our organizations are benefiting from when it comes to learning experience as well. Do they really understand and benefit from an AI experience versus an experience? I think for coaching, yes, definitely. I think for practicing stuff, definitely as well. But in terms of experiential, we need to be aware that is it given people by designing or developing or actually then even deploying stuff using AI, is it what people want, or are people going, actually, no, it's just stand away and actually have a more human-centric approach to how we do this?
Yeah, I hear a lot when I work with L&D teams that they've been told to implement AI from senior leadership or whomever at the top of the company. And I ask them why, same thing, I ask them why, and they have no idea. And I always try to corral people towards, let's figure out what the business objectives are that you're focusing learning on anyway, and how can AI help you do that so that we can still have a foundational
100%.
level of AI literacy, but now it's actually being used to solve a problem. I have seen recently, though, a couple of people start to share some of that knowledge. So here's something really cool we've done.
Yeah.
and here are the outcomes of that. These are the results that we've seen. This is the impact it's had, where we've got data to show that. So I think it's just starting, but it's very nascent still.
Yeah. And I think, sorry to interrupt, but I think it goes back to that, if we share we're using it, does it devalue our expertise and knowledge? So
Yes.
if we say, oh my God, we're an X company limited, and we've used AI to reduce this and actually makes it more efficient, and it's brilliant, and we want to make sure that anybody else is doing the same thing, because L&D, in essence, it's almost, to me, L&D is like everybody having a house with 4 rooms, and all you change by L&D is the colour of a wallpaper. But in principle, you're doing similar things in terms of learning, evaluation, leadership development. It's the same kind of stuff. And so I do think, there's just a need for confidence to go, this is really cool. And actually, if we all had more time to do the stuff which makes a bigger impact in our organizations, that would be even cooler as well.
I think to that end, as you mentioned, losing some of those skills and knowledge,
Yeah.
when you're introducing AI to the workforce and thinking about the skills, particularly as it relates to entry-level roles, what do we do to balance that with the skills and knowledge we might use if we're starting so early?
I think that's been a concern of mine, and if anybody who follows my LinkedIn, it's been posted a lot in April and May. I think there's almost a need to, when it comes to entry roles, to make sure that the people we have in those roles still get experience of building their foundations. And even if it's down to ring fencing certain activities where, some elements are done using AI and some elements are done using people as well. Because I think it's almost, I think a good example, if you're a chef, and bad example, I don't cook, but I'm going to make them something up. You know that you need a certain mixture to make a certain sauce, for example.
Yeah.
If AI automatically does that and just gives the sauce or just gives you the ingredients and it almost summarizes it, you never know what's missing if you never had experience as well.
Yes.
And I think for me, ring fencing certain activities alongside AI, I think also having senior or experienced people also being linked into mentoring and supporting entry-level roles more. So they're also sharing experience as well. And I think that for me is really important, because you then have this foundation being built. And on the flip side of it, you also then get entry-level roles given experience and information to their older colleagues as well. Experienced colleagues, I should say, not older, being ages. Yeah. So I think definitely ring-fencing it, definitely the bit about mentoring or even reverse mentoring. But I think also just being intentional about where we use it, being aware of the future connotations of what we do as an organisation is the bigger thing.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier as well, with the case of learning and learning design and that kind of thing, if you don't have the experience yourself, the human experience, understanding why we do things in certain ways, what is the science or the evidence behind why we do that, it becomes almost impossible to evaluate the output. So particularly for those earlier in their careers who don't necessarily yet have those foundational skills, or they're just starting to learn them, it skips quite a lot.
Yeah.
To where, as you said, they become reliant on it, or they could become reliant on it without understanding why we do this or that.
And I think the other thing is also, which is also on the flip side of the same coin, is you either have entry-level roles who become reliant on using AI because it takes away some of the foundation stuff and they go up a level, or you have a situation where entry-level roles don't exist, because if you're more experienced, you then use AI to do that stuff as well. So I think for both those particular, almost like avenues, there's a need for organisations, not just L&D, but organisations, to be very conscious in terms of, if we're using AI to do a certain aspect of a working organisation, what is the human issue? What's the human impact? What's the impact on our pipeline in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time? If the impact's going to be we don't have a pipeline of experience and knowledge, we need to be, again, going back to the word intentional around ring fencing certain roles, making sure they're supported, making sure the experiences are maintained as well. So in 5, 10, 15 years, you have people who've gone through a certain pipeline, but also if they are using AI, they also know the right questions, they have the judgment, they have the understanding, they have the critical thinking to go, it's just produced that, which is awesome. But I do know that just doesn't feel right, it doesn't seem right. I'm going to check that.
Yeah. And I think, speaking about skills and those sorts of skills that will be lost, and shift topics a little bit. Alongside AI, another big topic of conversation is shifting into skills-based organizations. Everybody's talking about it at the moment. What are your thoughts on that? What's your hot take?
Yeah, I think the whole concept has been spoken a lot. And again, even at Learning Tech last year and the year before, it was a very big topic. I think one of the things which we could move away from is spending a lot of time as L&D and HR specifically understanding the concept behind taxonomies and what skills are, and actually putting together huge documents or spreadsheets or PowerPoints of stuff which nobody uses. So it's, for me, when I look at companies that have done it well, they're focused on the key 3 or 4 or 5 skills the organisation needs, not for 174, and have gone, let's start small. Let's see what skills we need. Okay, so we know that we need agility of mind. We know that we need ability for people to have judgment. We know that we need people to be technically savvy, for example. How do we then understand what that looks like for us as a skill? So we actually ask people, and we say, okay, this skill, what does it look like? How do we understand, how do we assess this skill to make sure that when talking about it, we have the right levels to build people as well? And I think if you then ask those sorts of questions, you then go into the sequence of, we know what it is, we know how it looks in our organisation, we know how to assess it, we now know then how we need to build it, because we know we can measure what's happened as well in terms of assessment and what it looks like as well. And I think for me, the skills-based organisations does make sense, but I think it makes sense in a context of focusing on what has the biggest impact, not every single skill an organisation has, because by the time you've done that, it's moved on as well.
Yeah, so you think we're overthinking it a little bit with
100%.
the frameworks and the mapping, it can get to be too much.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about that sort of high level, what it looks like at the organizational level, how does that then trickle down into individual roles? How do you, what that might mean for a salesperson versus an engineer will look a bit different. So how do you differentiate those high level skills throughout the company?
Yeah, and again, I think for me, it's still having the conversations with people who are doing the roles, as well as having the conversations with people who are leading the roles, and then mapping both of those conversations to what the organisation needs going forward. So if I'm trying to think of a good example. You mentioned customer service, for example. There's been a lot of almost a dichotomy of organizational focus where companies have gone from digital to face-to-face,
Yeah.
which is weird because they've gone from face-to-face to digital and COVID happened. So if you think about, as an organization, we now need people who can talk to our customers. We need people who can interact. We need people who are happy to have those difficult conversations or those interesting conversations or to engage with people. And that skill is not easy to do. So for me, it's very much then working out, what does it look like when it's happening? And that skill could be, as I said before, it could be being courageous within every conversation. It could be being able to give some real great feedback, or it could be something as simple as being able just to listen and actually building it from the specific roles interacting with customers or the roles you need to build a strategy as well. I don't know if that answers you.
It does, yeah, it makes perfect sense. But I want to ask, related to that, as we've seen recently in the past, I don't know, a few years at least, there's been a lot of restructuring and reorgs across industry.
Yeah.
And do you think that in and of itself is a skills problem, or is it something else?
I think the skeptic in me thinks it's a money problem.
Okay, yeah.
And if existentially, it's a shareholder profit problem where there's a constant need to make profit when at some point every organization, every country just cannot make a profit. So I think that's an existential kind of bigger issue.
Spicy hot take.
Yeah. But I think if you move away from the fact the infrastructure and the system is there, which means people make profits, I think reorganizations are also down to not being aware quick enough where the organization needs to go as a collective. And if I think about a good example, when I was back in the Netherlands with an organization that did lighting, and one of the skills which we hadn't planned for was how the products we had could be used from a technological perspective outside of their traditional uses. So they could be used for the home, they could be used in public, they could be used in entertainment, but we hadn't really considered, for example, medical care or schools. Fast forward to the pandemic, and then there was the ability, when we all had to be very, very clean and do lots of stuff where you weren't touching stuff, there was an advance in technology which allowed lighting which would disinfect your room, for example.
Okay, yeah.
So basically people out of a room, turn light in, disinfect the room. We had built the expertise and knowledge over time, but we hadn't built the skill to articulate how we use that, especially in the pandemic. And that meant we missed an opportunity because it was a one-off, thank God, situation. But the skill to predict how what we could do could be applied wasn't there. The skill to actually practice stuff and understand, but the skill to apply it. And again, that meant that we missed opportunity. It meant that when you're talking about profit, you're talking about shareholders, you're talking about how much you made, again, we missed out on a potential boom. So I think when it comes down to organizations and skills and then reorganizations, there's a need to be better geared in thinking what might be coming around the corner. And again, not even 5 years, but 18 months to 3 years in essence as well. But there's also a need to be brave in saying, let's start upskilling people for what we think we're going to need now, as opposed to thinking this skill is needed now, bugger, let's do it all now. So I think trying to be very predictive, I think, is one of the things I think is a good way to try and avoid the whole redundancy, re-engineering, cost-cutting, rather than saying, oh, there are way too many people, we're going to cut cost. And then 2 years later, you rehire people as well. And that's one of the most frustrating sides. It's like fashion.
Yeah, I've seen that quite a lot, actually, that people are getting rehired.
Yeah.
So to your point about thinking ahead,
Yeah.
what do you think the role is of L&D in the next, as you said, few years? Is it a learning role? Is it a learning function? Or is it really about enabling the business?
Yeah. So I think we always say the business or be part of a business or seat at the table. There's these 3 phrases I've heard for many years. I think one of the roles of L&D is to move away from those 3 phrases, first and foremost. So we are the business, we are the organization, we are part of it, full stop. The second role, I think, is talking of skills. I think it's much more a role which is around connecting individuals across the organization in terms of skills gaps, skills, how do those people interact. It's very much around facilitating and how people access what they need to learn as well, rather than creating new stuff, unless it's internal and specific. And it's very much around marketing the benefit of learning. I think there's a very big need for L&D to almost realign why organizational internal learning expertise is just as interesting and beneficial as the stuff I learn outside of work. Because if I leave my office and pick up a smartphone or a tablet or a laptop, I can learn so much. If I then walk into the office, there's this connotation of, pants, it's work stuff, it's the compliance stuff, it's whatever, it's management. So I think there's a bit around how we remarket ourselves and also remarket the benefit of why it's amazing that you have people in your organisation who are helping you to grow, helping you to develop, help you to have a really good career. And I think that marketeer kind of role is really important. As I said, facilitation of networks, but also facilitation of content, I think is really important. And then being the driver of what organizations need to develop people alongside HR, alongside IT, alongside strategy, rather than being on the back end of, here's a strategy, here's how we're going to market, here's the people we need, but we need to train them. Can you guys do some stuff? So for me, the future of L&D and as a role is very much more front foot, part of the organization, very much more able to articulate business needs in business language and not talking about the jargon we've made as an industry as well, but ultimately making an impact for the people who are in the organisation in terms of their individual careers, their teams and the organisation as well.
Yeah, I was chatting with someone the other day who works in L&D and was saying she sometimes will take off her learning hat and put on her business hat. And it really is that combination of being able to flex back and forth. Yeah. So I completely agree. Last question for you before we wrap up, a hot take question, if you will. What do you think L&D teams should start doing or stop doing?
Wow. I think definitely stop. We should stop with vanity metrics. And by that, the happy sheets, the attendance, someone's logged into LinkedIn Learning and done it for 4 minutes and stuff. For me, that is a vanity metric. It doesn't prove impact. It doesn't prove application. Doesn't
but very
prove
common.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah. Yes, it is common. So I think one thing we should stop is vanity metrics, bin them, and just think about if someone is going through a learning journey, how do we make sure what they do is being deployed? And that can be by checking in, if it's a leadership thing, for example, checking in with their team. Are the team seeing different behaviours than the manager? For me, I mentioned managers, also team, if it's that kind of level of learning, we should be actually making sure applications happening through those people as well. And also it's linking a lot of what we do in terms of what we should be doing much more to the employee life cycle. So L&D, performance, succession, talent, all those things, for some reason, have these individual silos. For me, we need to be much more joined up in terms of how we see the experience of somebody who comes into an organisation from onboarding through to development, through to performance, through to succession, through to them being in a talent pool, through to them being leadership. And L&D should be part of all of those lines, making sure we're driving experience, driving their growth, and also driving what they get access to as well, I think.
Yeah, makes sense. I appreciate that hot take. Yeah. Thank you so much, Derek, for joining us. It's been absolutely a pleasure speaking with you this afternoon. And thanks to all of you for watching, listening. We hope you will join us next time on L&D Disrupt.
This episode of L&D Disrupt is brought to you by How Now, the learning platform that actually makes learning matter. Because let's face it, you could push out loads of content, track skills in a spreadsheet, drown in admin, and still not know what's working. Or you could use How Now to connect your people to the skills they need. Deliver learning in the flow of work and prove it's making a difference. That's how modern companies like Depop, Trainline, Crunchyroll, SoEnergy, 47, TomTom, Investec, and so many more do it. Learn more at gethownow.com.